All right, hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about Red Dye 40, and the title of my presentation is Red Dye 40, the Plague of Color. All right, so we're going to talk about four basic overview things about what Red Dye 40 affects. First one is neurological. So children with ADHD are more likely to be affected by Red Dye 40. They have things like hyperactivity and inattentiveness, which we'll talk about later. And the second thing we're going to talk about is the biological factors. Things contain carcinogenic material in Red Dye 40. That was by a study conducted by Sarah Koblewski. And then we're going to talk about the classroom environment. I'm an elementary education major, so this is pretty important to me, and I knew I wanted to incorporate this somewhere into my project. And these studies were done by Eugene Arnold. And lastly, we're going to talk about their home lives, such as sleep and behavior problems. And this is also a study conducted by David Shab. I used a lot of his work. All right, let's get into the neurological effects. So children with ADHD obviously have a negative effect from Red Dye 40. It can, according to a study done by David Shab, they're more likely to be hyperactive and inattentive after ingesting this Red Dye 40, such as things from classroom incentives or candies. We're going to talk about that later as well. So if you don't know what ADHD is, it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. These children, if they're not medicated properly, are already hyperactive and inattentive, and Red Dye 40 can greatly exacerbate these problems, and this can be a great issue for classroom teachers. Now you might be thinking, what about children that don't have ADHD? We call these children neurotypical children. If you don't know what neurotypical means, this just means that children develop at the same rate as their peers with the same learning skills at the appropriate time. So according to a study done in 2012 by Eugene Arnold, these neurotypical children are affected in the same ways, that they might not be greatly as affected. Such things such as hyperactivity, inattentiveness, and irritability. Obviously, irritability can affect the parent-child dyad, which we'll talk about later, and then inattentiveness and hyperactivity can affect greatly the classroom. All right, let's get into the biological side effects. So we're going to talk about carcinogens. If you don't know what a carcinogen is, it is a cancer-causing agent. So according to a study done by Sarah Koblewski, she tested the immunosuppressant activity and toxicity of Red Dye 40 in mice. And the discovery was that carcinogenic material was the result of the ingestion of Red Dye 40 in mice. And though this study was only done in mice and not humans, done for ethical reasons, this can greatly affect us as well, and we should take this very seriously. Cancer is obviously devastating for the families, loved ones, friends, everybody in a person's life. And this should be taken extremely seriously, that this was happening in mice. It can happen in humans as well. All right, let's talk about the classroom. So let's talk about incentives first. If you don't know what an incentive is, incentives are things such as prizes, candies, stickers, things that enforce good behavior through positive reinforcement. And a huge number of these incentives are things like candy. Skittles, Twizzlers, Swedish Fish. And a lot of these candies, especially the ones that I just named, contain Red Dye 40. So children's effects in the classroom contain hyperactivity and inattentiveness. Hyperactivity obviously disrupts the classroom environment. This can look like a child speaking out when they didn't raise their hand, but constantly doing the same thing over and over again and not understanding why that is happening or why it is wrong. Inattentiveness can look like zoning out, looking out the window at the playground, not listening to what the teacher is saying. Both of these things can greatly affect your standardized test scores. All right, we're going to talk about home life now. So sleeplessness and irritability are the two main things. These are both studies conducted by David Shab. Like I said, I used a lot of his work in my paper. Sleeplessness is a huge problem. This can damage not only a child's health and well-being, but their behavior in class as well. Irritability greatly affects the parent-child dyad, and this can affect the relationship between the parents and the child. Not only the parents and the child, but their siblings as well. All right, I want to talk a little bit about if this is tested. This is the thing that interested me the most. So when the FDA tests for red dye 40, they only test for free-floating benzodiene in the material. Benzodiene is greatly harmful. Benzodiene binds to molecules. This means that any of the free-floating benzodiene is picked up from the test, but the benzodiene that binds to the molecules is not. Therefore, the benzodiene that binds to the molecules is not picked up in the test. But unfortunately, there's low funding for these tests, and it's a very expensive process. Again, this is from a study done by Sarah Kowalewski. And I thought this was just very interesting that they don't pay for the better test, even to find that there's more benzodiene in red dye 40. Okay, we're going to talk about the other side briefly. So a lot of critics against the harmful effects of red dye 40, they don't believe in it, obviously side with the FDA. In 2012, there was a narrow vote that approved red dye 40, which passed in the FDA. This means that the FDA approved it for human consumption in moderation. But I believe with the things that I have shown in this presentation that red dye 40 is harmful and needs to be studied further. Another thing I just wanted to bring up briefly is that people in Germany, they have over 50% of people that are dieting want to cut out artificial food colorings, which is the synthetic dye which red dye 40 falls under. They want to cut these out of their diets. I think that this shows that people are concerned about red dye 40 and their consumption of it, not only red dye 40, but other synthetic dyes as well. All right, thank y'all for listening to me, and I hope y'all have a great rest of your day.